What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic, and as many of you have probably already heard, there was a very tragic incident that happened at Epic Universe as a guest riding Stardust Racers passed away. And there's lots of questions around what happened here. We had another video talking about what we knew at the time. So since that initial video, we do have more details about the victim, his medical background, as well as some eyewitness accounts on what may have happened on this ride, on this very terrible incident here. And so in this video, we're going to go through all this information and give some thoughts on it here. And I just want to say, before we get into it, I'm going to be very respectful. This is a very tragic, incident. I'm not going to be hyperbolic. I don't want to be hyperbolic about this. I want to be very respectful to the victim here, Kevin Rodriguez Zavala, and just trying to figure out what happened here. Just provide information as best that I can here. So we're going to start here in Fox 35 Orlando. I have an article about this. It says incident report: dispatch audio released in Epic Universe rider's death. It says new details were released Friday regarding the death of a 32-year-old man after he rode Stardust Racers dueling roller coaster at Epic Universe. The Orange County Sheriff's Office released a partially redacted incident report as well as 2 brief audio files of conversations between first responders and dispatch. And we'll take a listen to those recordings here in just a moment. Kevin Rodriguez Zavala was at Epic Universe with his longtime girlfriend on Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. Zavala rode Stardust Racers Wednesday night and became unresponsive at some point on the ride and later died at the hospital. The Orange County medical examiner said Zavala suffered multiple blunt force injuries and ruled his death an accident. We also know that he did have a pre-existing condition. They said, according to the incident report, it was revealed that Zavala, who uses a wheelchair, had a pre-existing spinal injury and was taking medication for it. What is not known is whether that was or wasn't a contributing factor in his death. The Orange County medical examiner has not released the full autopsy results, so it is unclear where exactly Zavala was injured or at what point on or off the ride. Dispatch audio noted that Zavala had a laceration or a cut somewhere and that he was unresponsive. And they said CPR was also being performed. So it's according to the responding deputy, when he arrived at the Stardust Racers ride, he noticed several members of the Orange County Fire Rescue Department and Universal's Health Services members performing CPR on Zavala on the loading platform next to one of the ride's vehicles. CPR continued as Zavala was transported by ambulance to Orlando Regional Medical Center, and roughly an hour after the first deputy arrived, Zavala was declared dead at the hospital, according to times provided in the incident report. The Orange County Sheriff's Office said it received no 911 calls related to the Stardust Racers incident. That was likely because riders have to place cell phones and other loose items in secured lockers before being allowed to ride the coaster. Passengers also go through a medical detector before reaching the loading platform. That is a typo that they should probably fix because they do not have medical detectors on that ride. They have metal detectors. So I don't know what a medical detector would be, but yes, when you get on this ride, you do have to go through a metal detector and you cannot have phones or other loose items. So the possibility that something from another guest came off and hit him, though the chances aren't zero, as people can sneak things into rides and places they're not supposed to, but given the precautions that Universal takes on this ride, one would assume it's very low chance that somebody had a phone or other item that flew out of their hand and struck him. And the fact that there were no 911 calls, I mean, you have lots of police on site at major theme parks. You have medical services there. So, and you don't have people with cell phones there. So obviously, the authorities were called via not using 911. So it's not like they didn't have a quick response time here necessarily, but the fact that nobody had access to their phones, they didn't have a lot of 911 calls coming in. But also this is why you're not seeing a lot of footage of the aftermath of this, because people, didn't have their phones. And I think that's why you basically just have eyewitness accounts as to what happened here, which we will take a look at some of these when we're done with this article. They said state investigators are on site at Epic Universe. They say at Epic Universal. They really need to get some better copywriters here. Jeez. The Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services confirmed to Fox 35 that one of its inspectors was at Epic Universe on Friday related to its investigation into the death of Zavala. The Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is aware of the incident and currently has an investigator on scene. Universal has been extremely cooperative and has complied with all required notifications. This is an ongoing investigation, and more information will be released as it is available. And then, of course, with this, obviously, we have a lot of questions about what happened here, but one of them, not only Universal potentially being at fault with this, we don't know the details, but also you got to look at the ride manufacturer potentially, because if something happened with this ride, it is going to include the ride manufacturer, and that was Mack Rides, who built Stardust Racers. They are the coaster manufacturer of this. They also released a statement. They said that we are deeply saddened by the tragic incident involving the Stardust Racers attraction. As the investigation by the relevant authorities is still ongoing, we kindly ask for your understanding that we are currently unable to comment on the circumstances of the accident, a spokesperson said. Of course, we are in close contact with the operator and the authorities and are actively supporting the investigation. At this time, we must refer you to the operator's press office for further information. Now, we also have some eyewitness accounts we're going to go through here, kind of give maybe a better picture of what happened here.
Tommy Italiano was second in line, about to board.
We saw the lady jump over the railing, and we later found out that she was a doctor, and she went to administer emergency aid.
Italiano says he saw the unresponsive man still strapped in the seat, and people were panicking because no one had their phones. Riders are required to check their belongings into a locker before riding.
The most concerning part, and I actually ended up helping a few people, there was parents that had their kids stuck on the ride. They were in hysterics, crying.
We also have an eyewitness account here. This is from News 6 in Orlando. And that's I'll just read it because the lady here is Colombian and her English is not the best. So I'll just kind of go through kind of what she said here. And this was fellow guest Maria Fernandez, who said she was one of the dueling racers at the same time as Zavala, and recounted what happened. She said, when I was on the ride, the travel finishes and one girl starts to say, help, help, help. She explained. The girl was screaming and we didn't understand what happened. When the ride came to a stop, security began to usher riders off the roller coaster, she added. She said that Zavala appeared to be slumped over, bleeding with his legs seemingly broken. I don't know if he was dead in the moment, but I think yes, she continued. The broken leg, or seemingly having a broken leg, obviously throws another thing into this, given we do know he was wheelchair bound. Could it be the fact that his leg just looked in a bad position due to the fact that he's in a wheelchair, or did something hit his legs? Like, there are a lot more questions coming out of this. And we also have the guy that was in the other video, Tommy Italiano. He has a TikTok account. He has some firsthand videos talking about this. We're going to watch a couple of these.
I was on the platform of Stardust Racers last night at Epic Universe during the incident when the guests arrived unresponsive in the station, and it was complete chaos. So this is what happened from my personal experience. My friend and I were waiting to board in row 1, and then a team member started screaming on top of their lungs, get out, leave, get off the platform. Clearly, the employees were not trained for a situation like this, because they just started screaming at the guests and demanding us leave. And then a woman jumped over the railing, which we later found out who was a doctor. And it looked like she took her shirt off to apply a tourniquet because there was an injury. As I walked by the victim, they were completely slouched over, and a piece of metal from the back of the seat was detached. I don't know if an employee detached it to do the emergency seat release, but it was detached when we walked by, and the person was completely unresponsive, and the employees just kept screaming at us to leave, leave, leave. And this was just within minutes. The situation was ongoing for hours. The sheriff's department showed up, and not only that, probably 50 cast members, some guest service people, which very few. And quite frankly, it was one of the most unprofessional situations I've ever seen in a theme park in my entire life. Some really sad things happened, which I'm going to go into, but this is very concerning. One of the biggest issues that I personally had to deal with is that my belongings were held and we could not even get them. And not only that, they would not give us our belongings at Stardust Racers. They removed them and took them to Lost and Found and made us walk across the park, and unable to use our phones to call anyone, to record anything. And it was completely unacceptable on how they were acting. Like I said in my previous video, I I do not believe that this guest passed at the hospital. It seemed like they passed on the roller coaster. And if you ask anyone else that was there, which there are a lot of witnesses, I think they would say the same thing.
And he also has, we're just going to list this first part here about the actual dispatch call that you can hear.
We were told to respond to a patient with a laceration and was unresponsive. We got there, he is not breathing, and CPR is in progress.
So obviously that's a lot more information than we had initially. Now that also brings in a lot of questions about, we knew about the blunt force trauma, and now you hear about these lacerations. The one guest was saying that it looked like his leg was broken, so we don't know, but we don't know where the laceration was. They did not release that in the medical examiner's report, which could help give us a better picture potentially what happened here. If the woman that was a doctor jumped over was applying a tourniquet, that would lead one to believe there was a laceration outside of the head, because you're not going to apply a tourniquet when you have a head injury. Obviously, you'd have to put that around your neck, and they're not going to do that. So that would lead to either an arm or a leg. Then that brings into question, how did they get the laceration? And he talked about there's a potentially piece of the coaster seat back or whatever was removed off. Whether that was, I don't know if that was in front of him or behind him. It could have been that the team members, they do have ways of manually opening up doors and getting people off of rides. It could have been that, especially if you're dealing with a wheelchair accessible part of it. Sometimes they have parts that come off. So I think that doesn't necessarily mean that piece came off and hit him, but it also does bring questions that it could have. So undoubtedly, when you're looking at this, obviously something tragic took place here. Obviously, I mean, a man passed away, and it's incredibly sad, but it's seemingly also something caused some injuries outside of what was initially thought. Because my initial thoughts and speculation on my other video was that, he could have passed out. And when that happened, he didn't have control of his neck, and his head could have bounced around, and that could have caused the blunt force trauma. Because when you're talking about blunt force trauma death, that would lead one to think head injury or chest. That's the two places where blunt force trauma are going to be the most potential deadly in a situation like that. So it seems likely his head was hit. But it also seems there was a laceration. Now, the laceration, something could have hit him. Something could have flew off the ride and hit him. I suppose potentially, given that he did have a pre-existing condition, he was in a wheelchair. We don't know in terms of how much mobility he had in his legs or his arms for that matter. And maybe if he did pass out, potentially if you're not able to control any of your limbs, you could see, again, this is all just, I'm trying to be very respectful and just thinking out loud here about things that could have happened. But, your arms could just be flailing around. I could definitely see where your arms could end up hitting different things while you're on there. Now, your leg, I don't know. That seems a little bit more harder, that your legs could flail around on this ride and hit some things, although I guess it's possible. But there's just a lot of questions around this right now. And I didn't show, but he goes on in other TikToks that he really goes at Universal about, not being able to get to your phones and how they handle this situation. And I'll just say, when you're dealing with people that they can be trained for things to happen, but something of this nature happening, you're dealing with mostly, teenagers and, 20-year-olds that are operating these rides. You can have all the training in the world, but when that situation comes up, there's probably going to be panic. And at that moment, you're just focused on dealing with the guest that is in a grave situation. And so getting everybody off the platform, getting them out of there, the phones and all that stuff, all your belongings, that's an inconvenience. But at the same time, you're dealing with a much bigger issue at hand. So those things can be dealt with later. And that does lead to others. There were reports that people were really frantic because they had heard in the park that something had happened on this ride. They couldn't find a family member. So I completely understand how that could be absolutely terrifying. But given the situation, I don't know. I'm not surprised that that's how that was played out. I don't know if that's how Universal sets it up. That's what they're supposed to do. And then you're talking about not being able to go back to get them. More than likely at that point, I would assume maybe it's a crime scene and you don't want a bunch of other guests coming in to contaminate a crime scene. So them taking it to Lost and Found that I'm guessing that is just the way they decided to handle that given what happened here. Because those were taken, I'm sure, after they've learned that he had died. So inconvenience for sure. And I don't think that points to them getting everybody off the platform, not having phones. I don't think this points to a cover up. I just think, again, how this ride is set up where you can't have your phone on here. So all those people on that platform would not have had their phone, and then you have an emergency pop up, they're going to be taken off the platform immediately and not just go to their lockers and all that. That's just one of those things where it's an inconvenience, but there's bigger worries at hand than you being able to get your phone and have your items at that time, even though I can understand how the other issues can pop up with not being able to find family members and things like that. So I'm not going to have too much ire at Universal for that necessarily, because again, I don't know the protocols there, but I can see a situation where that's how you handle it. Lots of questions here about this, of course. And really, I'm not going to point blame at anybody. I don't think there's enough information to start pointing blame at who's at fault here. Is it Universal? Is it a ride manufacturer? Is it the guest with a pre-existing condition? We just don't know enough, and I'm not going to sit up here and act like I have more information than you guys have. I'm literally telling you everything that I have found, and I just don't feel like there's enough information to really start pointing blame here. I'm personally just going to wait for the investigation to see what they have to say. But obviously, depending on what they find out, it's tragic nonetheless. But if it is the situation where it was a pre-existing condition that caused him to potentially pass out, and that's what happened here, still incredibly sad. And you never want to see that happen. And again, I can't even imagine going to a theme park and you leave with one less family member than you came with. And that's just incredibly sad. And thoughts and prayers to the family. But it's another completely different one if you're talking about the fact that the ride itself caused this. Did something fly off? Did something happen? The ride, whatever, something happened on the ride. If that did happen, then you're talking about a really big fallout from this. And you're talking about Universal having a lot of, I'm sure there would be fines, obviously reputational damage. Do people feel safe riding the rides? There's going to be a lot of questions on the maintenance. Was maintenance being done? Again, these rides are tested daily in major theme parks all the time. And I looked this up real quick. If you look at the chances of dying on a roller coaster, according to the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, they say the chance of dying on a roller coaster are approximately 1 in 750 million to 1 in 170 million rides. So you're talking about very low chances of this happening, as they typically do lots of maintenance here and they take safety very seriously. So if something did happen on this ride, there would have to be some sort of major overlook by maintenance. Then you're getting into insurance for this. Then you're getting into lawsuits about this, which potentially lawsuits will happen no matter what in this situation. There is potentially a lot of fallout for Universal if it is found out that this ride is what caused the problem here and led to his death. Then you're talking about the ride manufacturer as well, because it's not, again, it's not just Universal. It's the ones that made the ride. Did they do something in the way they built it? Was it something that doesn't typically fall under daily inspections? So the fallout from that would be, I don't even know. I don't know if we've ever actually seen that before, of what this would do in terms of the fines that would take place, the reputation damage, like all these things. I mean, that's obviously a whole thing that could happen there. But given what we know, I'm not here to point blame. I don't know. All I know is that it's an incredibly sad situation. I feel terrible for this family. And on that note, his family did set up a GoFundMe in loving memory of Kevin Rodriguez Zavala. Currently, they have almost $25,000 raised. They had an $8,000 goal, so they have met their goal and gone far and beyond that. So if you do want to donate to his cause or to his GoFundMe, I will put a link in the description if you want to do that. But either way, it's a very, very terrible situation. And like I said, I'm not going to sit up here and act like I have all the information and start pointing blame. I'm personally going to wait for the more details, the investigation to come out before we figure out what happened here. But very sad. And when there is more information on this, I will let you guys know in here on another video. But for now, that is going to be it, though, for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.